He left on a Tuesday evening in November of 1987. He said he was going for candles and batteries. There was a storm coming. The radio had been saying so all afternoon, and they were low on both. Cecilia was in the kitchen. The children were in the living room. He put on his coat. He said he would be back before dark. The storm arrived before he did. By 8 o'clock, the power was out and the snow was coming sideways past the windows, and Cecilia had the fireplace going and both children wrapped in blankets on the living room floor. She had found the candles herself, 3 in the kitchen drawer, 2 more in the cabinet above the refrigerator. She lit them. She made hot chocolate on the gas range. She told the children it was an adventure. She waited until midnight. Then she stopped waiting and went to sleep in the chair by the fire, because someone needed to stay awake and she was the one who was there. He did not come back that night. He did not come back the next day or the day after that. He did not call. He did not write. He simply did not return the way a tide goes out and keeps going past the point where you can still believe it will come back. 37 years passed. The children grew up. The house stayed standing. Cecilia worked and managed and bought a box of candles every month and kept them in the kitchen cabinet and did not explain this habit to anyone. Then on an afternoon in March of 2024, someone knocked on her door. He was older, smaller somehow in the way that men become when the life they built turns out to require something they cannot provide themselves. He was holding a folder. He could not quite meet her eyes. Cecilia looked at him for a moment. Then she opened the door wider and said, "Come in, Leonard." He sat at her kitchen table and placed the folder in front of him and said with the careful delivery of a man who has rehearsed this, "It's a quitclaim deed. The lawyer says it's straightforward. Your signature releases any claim. It takes maybe 10 minutes. Cecilia looked at the document on the table, at the signature line, blank, at the pen beside it, uncapped, waiting. She looked at Leonard. A long silence. She said, "I know what it is, Leonard." He looked up. Something moved across his face, the particular expression of a man who has just understood that the conversation he prepared for is not the conversation he is in. She said quietly, "I've known for 3 years." The kitchen was still around them. Outside March, light came in through the window above the sink. On the counter beside the stove, a box of candles sat in its usual place. Cecilia said, "Would you like some tea?" The knock came at 2:40 on a Tuesday afternoon while Cecilia was filling the kettle. She knew it was not Catherine. Catherine's knock was 3 quick beats, the impatient rhythm of a woman who had been letting herself into this house since childhood and considered the knock a courtesy rather than a request. This was 2 beats, then silence, then 2 beats again. The knock of someone who had prepared what they would say and lost it on the doorstep. She set the kettle on the burner. She went to the door. The kitchen she left behind was the kitchen of 37 years of a woman alone, organized in the way that single living organizes a space, every object in a place it earned. The corkboard by the refrigerator with Catherine's children's drawings layered over each other in the way of things that accumulate because you cannot bring yourself to remove the older ones. The shelf above the counter with its box of emergency candles replaced the first Tuesday of every month, never explained to anyone who had thought to ask. She opened the door. Leonard was 78 years old and smaller than the version of him that had existed in her peripheral memory for 37 years, not dramatically, just the natural reduction of a man who had been living without whatever it was that had kept him large. He was holding a manila folder pressed against his chest with both hands. He looked at the doormat, then at her shoes, then with the particular effort of a man doing something that costs him at her face. "Cecilia!" She had not heard that voice in 37 years. It was older, which was obvious. It was uncertain, which was not what she had expected. She looked at him for a moment. 3 years of preparation met the actual fact of him on her doorstep, and what she found in the living of it was not what she had rehearsed. She was not as angry as she had imagined. She was not moved in the way she had half feared. She was simply clear. She stepped back from the door. "Come in, Leonard." She gave him the chair across from hers. Not her chair, the one she had sat in every Tuesday for 30 years, but the one opposite it, the visitor's chair, the chair that had held Catherine and Catherine's husband and two different insurance agents and a neighbor who came once about a property line question and never returned. He sat in it with the careful placement of someone entering a space that used to be familiar and is no longer. She turned back to the stove. The kettle was beginning. She made the tea, her tea, the same she made every Tuesday, 2 cups, because there were 2 people in the kitchen, and she was who she was. She did not ask if he wanted any. She placed the cup in front of him without comment and sat down in her chair and picked up her own. Leonard said, "I didn't know if you'd open the door." She looked at him over her cup. "You knocked." He looked at the manila folder on the table between them. He had not opened it. She had not looked at it. "You look tired," she said. It was not a kindness. It was an observation. He was tired, visibly, specifically tired, in the way of someone who has been carrying something for longer than they anticipated and has not yet been able to put it down. "Yes," he said. He opened the folder. He began haltingly at first, the words coming in the wrong order, and then with more structure as the legal language gave him something to organize around. The property in Columbus, a commercial building he had purchased in 1991, a sale he was trying to complete, a title issue his attorney had found during the closing preparation, the quitclaim deed in front of her, her signature, a formality his lawyer had said. 10 minutes. The lawyer says it's straightforward. Your signature releases any claim. It's a formality. You'd just be... Cecilia said, "I know what it is, Leonard." He stopped. He looked at her with the expression of a man who drove 4 hours to deliver information and has just understood that the delivery was unnecessary. "You knew..." "I've known for 3 years." The kitchen was completely still. Outside the window, the March afternoon continued its ordinary business. On the shelf above the counter, the box of candles sat in its place. The look on Leonard's face was not what she had imagined when she had imagined this moment. There was no calculation in it, no reassessment of strategy. There was only unguarded shock, the simple, unprepared shock of a man who thought he was holding the only information in the room and discovered he was the least informed person at the table. She let the silence hold for a moment. Then she said, "Drink your tea, it's getting cold." He picked up the cup with both hands. They were slightly unsteady, the hands of a 78-year-old man who had driven 4 hours and found something other than what he prepared for. He drank. She watched him the way you watch someone you once knew when you are trying to locate what, if anything, of the original remains, not with grief, not with anger, only with the focused attention of a woman conducting an accurate assessment. "You should have called," she said finally. "I would have saved you the drive." He said, "I wasn't sure you'd answer." She looked at him. "No, you weren't sure what I'd say." He nodded once. It was the most honest thing he had done since he knocked. She had known for 3 years. He had driven 4 hours preparing what to say to a woman he hadn't seen in 37 years, and in the first 2 minutes she had told him she already knew handed him tea and said nothing about whether she would sign. He had come prepared for a negotiation. What he found instead was a woman who had already finished all the preparation on her own in her own time and was now simply waiting to see what he would do with the space she gave him. If stories like this matter to you, stories about quiet people who were dismissed but never truly defeated, this channel was made for you. Subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. The hour before the storm was ordinary in the way that last ordinary hours always are, unremarkable, until afterward when the memory of them becomes the thing you return to. Cecilia was at the stove. Catherine was at the kitchen table with her crayons working on something that required her tongue between her teeth. Daniel was already in his pajamas dragging a toy truck across the linoleum with the patient repetition of a 4-year-old for whom repetition is its own purpose. The radio on the counter had been mentioning the storm since afternoon's significant accumulation, high winds, residents advised to prepare. Leonard came to the kitchen doorway with his coat already on and his keys in his hand. "Gonna get candles and batteries? Storm's coming? Back in 20 minutes. The door closed. The car started. She heard it back out of the driveway, the particular sound of their car on the particular gravel of their driveway, a sound she had heard 1,000 times. She turned back to the stove. The taillights disappeared into the beginning snow. At 9 p.m., the storm arrived faster and harder than the radio had forecast, which is the nature of storms. At 9:14, the power went out. The house went from kitchen lit to dark in an instant, and Cecilia was already moving before the children could react to it. Flashlight from the kitchen drawer, she knew exactly where it was, because she was a woman who knew where things were. 2 candles in the back of the pantry. She lit them both. She brought Catherine and Daniel to the living room and put them on the couch under the good wool blanket and built a fire in the fireplace with the wood that was stacked beside it, because she had always been the one who stacked it. The children watched her with the wide-eyed attention of children who are deciding whether to be frightened, based entirely on whether the adult in the room is frightened. She was not frightened. She was watching for headlights in the driveway. At 10, she called his work number. It rang without answer, which was expected. The office would be closed. She called the number for his friend Gary, the only mutual friend she could think of. A woman answered. Cecilia asked for Leonard. The woman said he wasn't there. Cecilia asked if she'd seen him. The woman said, "No, not tonight. Was everything all right?" Cecilia said, "Fine, thank you. Sorry to bother you." She hung up. She put another log on the fire. By midnight, the children were asleep on the couch, and she was in the armchair beside the fire, and she was thinking with the particular clarity that arrives when adrenaline has settled completely into something colder and more accurate that he was not coming back tonight. She did not yet extend the thought further. That extension would come later in pieces over weeks, as the phone continued not to ring and the mailbox continued to produce nothing addressed in his handwriting. Tonight, the thought stopped at tonight. She had learned somewhere in the years of managing a household with 2 small children and a husband whose presence was intermittent at best that the unit of survival is always the immediate situation, not the week, not the year. Tonight, she checked the children. She put another log on. She found 2 more candles in a kitchen drawer she had half forgotten and brought them to the mantel and lit them. The room held a steady amber warmth. She did not sleep. In the morning, the storm was over and the power came back at 7, and Catherine woke up and said immediately before anything else, "Where's Daddy?" Cecilia was already at the stove. "He got stuck in the storm, sweetheart. He'll call when he can." She made eggs. She made toast. She poured orange juice into the 2 small glasses she always used for the children and set them on the table and called Daniel in from the living room. She made breakfast with the full attention of a woman who had decided sometime in the armchair between midnight and dawn that whatever was happening, and she was beginning to understand the shape of what was happening, would not reach her children through the eggs and the toast and the orange juice. It would not reach them today. Today there was breakfast. The weeks after were quiet in a way that was worse than noise. No call, no letter, no explanation. A mutual acquaintance told her 3 weeks later, with the embarrassed discomfort of someone delivering news they wished they didn't have, that Leonard's car had been seen regularly at an address in the north part of town. Cecilia thanked her for telling her. She did not go to the address. She called her mother that evening. The call lasted 40 minutes. At the end of it, her mother said, "What do you need?" Cecilia said, "A job with benefits and a good school district." She had both within 2 months. She filed nothing. She pursued nothing. She was 41 years old with 2 children and a job to find, and there was no room in any of it for the legal and emotional machinery of formal dissolution. She simply moved forward the way she had gotten through the storm night, by attending to the immediate thing, then the next immediate thing, then the one after that. The week after the storm, she bought a full box of emergency candles and put them in the kitchen cabinet. She replaced them the first Tuesday of every month, a new box and the old one out, whether or not she had used any. It cost almost nothing. It took almost no time. It became as automatic as buying milk. Catherine, at 14, noticed the shelf. "Mom, why do you always buy candles? We never use them." Cecilia had been putting away groceries. She placed the new box on the shelf in its place without turning around. "Because I know how to get through a power outage now." Catherine had accepted this the way teenagers accept answers that are technically complete and emotionally evasive. She had let it go. but she had remembered the answer. She would think about it again at 54 when her mother called her about a quitclaim deed and she understood for the first time the full weight of what the candles had always meant. Present day. The kitchen. The fire of that November had been 37 years ago, and the room was fully lit, and Leonard was sitting across the table from her, with his hands around a cup of tea she had made him. Cecilia looked at him. "You left in a storm," she said. Not an accusation, a fact delivered the way she delivered all facts, simply with its full weight and nothing added. "I know," he said. "I made it through that night," she said. "I made it through everything that came after that night." She picked up her own cup. She looked at him with the clear, settled attention of a woman who has not been angry about this in a very long time, who has simply incorporated it the way you incorporate weather. "You should know that before we talk about the document." She had been 41 years old with 2 children in a powerless house in a November storm, and she had gotten through it with 2 candles and a fireplace, and the decision not to let her children see her be afraid. She had replaced those candles every month for 37 years. Not because she expected another storm, because she had learned on that night that the only person she could rely on to make sure the candles were there was herself. She had not been angry about that in a very long time. She had simply incorporated it. The letter arrived on a Thursday in October of 2021 in an envelope with a Columbus return address and the name of a property consulting firm she had never heard of. It was addressed to her by full name Cecilia Ann Marsh, which was the name on her marriage certificate and her mortgage and her retirement paperwork, and which she had kept because changing it had never seemed worth the effort, and because it was, after all, her name, too. She read it once, she read it twice, then she called Catherine. Catherine came over that evening and read the letter at the kitchen table with the focused attention of a woman who manages other people's problems for a living and knows how to read a document for what it is actually saying beneath what it appears to be saying. She looked up. "Do you know what this is about?" "Not yet," Cecilia said. "But I know the address. It's Columbus. I know what Leonard was doing in Columbus in 1991. How do you know that?" "A mutual acquaintance mentioned it years ago. He bought a building with Donna's money after her father died." A pause. "I never asked for details. I didn't need them then." Catherine looked at her mother with the expression she had developed over 54 years of being Cecilia's daughter, the expression of a woman recalibrating the altitude at which she is operating. "What do you want to do?" "I want to understand what I'm looking at before I do anything." Catherine found Ren Nakamura through a colleague, a real estate attorney mid-40s, precise in the way of someone who has spent her career in the gap between what people believe they own and what they actually own. They met the following week. Ren spent 5 days researching before she called Cecilia with her findings. The marriage had never been legally dissolved. A property purchased during the nominal continuation of the marriage, even a marriage abandoned in practice for 4 years, before the purchase had a title chain that touched Cecilia's name through community property provisions that had not been properly examined or cleared at the time of the 1991 transaction. Cecilia's actual ownership interest was in the strict legal sense thin. It was also real enough to create what Wren called a cloud on the title. Mrs. Marsh Dorst, Wren said in the careful voice of an attorney who wants to be precise without overpromising, "You are not a property owner in any meaningful practical sense. You have no right to the income the property has generated, no claim to the appreciation, and no interest a court would likely enforce in a contested proceeding." She paused. "However, your name creates a title defect that cannot be cleared without your signature on a quitclaim deed. Without that signature, Leonard cannot sell this property, cannot refinance it, and cannot transfer it to anyone, including any heirs." Another pause. "You have no obligation to sign. You have no obligation to respond to this letter. You have no obligation to contact Leonard or anyone associated with him." Cecilia said, "But he will eventually need to contact me." "If he ever wants to do anything with this property, yes. He will have to come to you." Cecilia looked at the window. Outside, the October afternoon was doing what October afternoons do, going golden, going quiet, moving toward dark. and I have no financial claim worth pursuing. The claim exists technically. It would not survive a serious legal challenge, and pursuing it would cost more than it would return. This is not a leverage position for money." Wren's voice was even and entirely without judgment. "It is simply a position." "I understand," Cecilia said. She did. She did not respond to the consulting firm's letter. She instructed Wren to monitor the property's status quietly, any sale activity, any refinancing attempts, any transfer filings. She paid the retainer. She went home. Wren asked at the end of that first meeting, "What are you waiting for?" Cecilia considered the question with genuine seriousness. "I'm not waiting for anything specific," she said. "I'm waiting to see what he does." A pause. "He left without explanation for 37 years. I think I'm entitled to watch for a while before I decide anything." Wren said, "That's a reasonable position." Cecilia said, "I've had a long time to find reasonable positions." The 3 years were not dramatic. Wren sent quarterly updates, the property status, any recorded activity. There was very little to report. The building sat. Leonard apparently was not attempting a sale. Cecilia received the updates the way she received the quarterly statements from her retirement account, as information to be noted and filed relevant to a decision that was hers to make when the time was right. Her life continued in its Tuesday shape. Tea at 2:40, Catherine's grandchildren on weekends, a reading group at the library on alternate Wednesdays. They were working through a series of novels that one of the members had recommended, slow books that rewarded patience. The monthly candles in and out the shelf maintained. She thought about the property occasionally the way you think about a thing you have set somewhere intentionally, knowing it is there, knowing you will return to it. Not with obsession, not with grievance, with the settled attention of a woman who has filed something correctly and gotten on with her life. In February of 2024, Wren called. "There's been activity, a sale listing, and a title search company has been running records on the property. Someone will find the issue within 60 days, probably less." A pause. "How do you want to handle the contact when it comes?" Cecilia was quiet for a moment. "I want to handle it at home," she said. "If he comes, I'll see him here, not in an office." She looked at the kitchen, her kitchen the window above the sink, the shelf above the counter. "And Wren, I've decided what I'm going to do. I just want to see him first." Wren said, "All right." She did not ask what Cecilia had decided. It was not her decision. Cecilia stopped at the grocery store on the way home. She bought the usual items and a new box of emergency candles. She placed the candles on the shelf in the kitchen in their place, the old box going out, the new one going in, the way it had always gone, the way it would always go as long as she lived in this house. She made tea. She sat in her chair. She waited not with anxiety, not with anger, but with the particular settled patience of a woman who had spent 37 years learning that time always moves in the direction of truth, and who had decided what she would do before he knocked, and who simply wanted to see his face first. The tea had gone half cold, and the manila folder was open on the table between them, and Leonard had understood in the 10 minutes since he sat down that he was not in the room he had prepared for. He had prepared for a woman who would need explaining to. He was sitting across from a woman who had known more than him for 3 years and had simply waited to see what he would do with his ignorance. The legal language he had rehearsed in the car was useless here. He set it aside. He said, I know I owe you an explanation from before, not just about the property." Cecilia said, "You don't owe me anything, Leonard." He looked at her. I don't mean that coldly. I mean, I don't need an explanation from you to understand what happened. I understood it 37 years ago." She looked at her cup. "What I've never fully understood is why you thought leaving in the middle of a storm was the way to do it." He said, "I didn't plan the storm." "No," she looked at him. "You just used it." Not bitter, not sharp, simply factual, the way she stated everything as a thing that had happened that had a shape that could be named accurately. He looked at his hands. "I was a coward," he said. "Yes." She did not elaborate, she did not soften it. She let the word sit exactly where it had landed. He told her about Donna. Not as a confession he was past the register of confession had been past it for 5 years, but as a filling in of facts she had deserved to have long before now. The years with Donna, not the life he had imagined when he drove away from the storm, which had been a life of some vague freedom he had never been specific enough with himself to describe. Just a life, made from a bad beginning and carried through the way lives are carried through, when you have made your choices and must live inside them. Donna's illness, the long kind, the kind that reorganizes everything around it. Her death in 2019. He said she was sick for 4 years before she died. It was hard. Cecilia listened without expression. Not because she felt nothing, but because she had, at some point in the years between the storm and this kitchen, felt everything there was to feel about Donna and Leonard and the bad beginning, and arrived at a place that was neither warm nor cold. It was simply finished. She had no use for his account of Donna's death as an occasion for sympathy, and she was not going to perform sympathy she did not have. But she listened because she was a woman who listened when people told her true things, even people she had no particular reason to be generous to. When he finished, she said, "Bryce needs the money from the sale. You said that earlier." "Yes, he's in trouble, business trouble. I'm trying to help him." "I know who Bryce is." He looked up. Catherine mentioned him once years ago. After the consulting firm letter came, she did some research. She found the Columbus records, found Donna's name, found Bryce. She knew, too. His voice had the quality of a man discovering that the perimeter he thought he was managing had no perimeter at all. "I told her when the letter came, she's my daughter, Leonard." Cecilia looked at him steadily. "She was in that house the night of the storm. She was 6 years old. She asked me the next morning where you were, and I told her you got stuck in the storm." A pause. "I told her that for 3 weeks until I had a better answer." I don't think she ever entirely believed the first one. Silence. Then Leonard said, "How is she?" The question was quiet and entirely unguarded, the question of a man who had been alone since 2019, doing the arithmetic of what he missed, which was the kind of arithmetic that has no good answer and must be done anyway. "She's well," Cecilia said. "She has 3 grandchildren of her own now." He was quiet. The arithmetic continued behind his eyes. She watched him do it without helping him with it. It was his. After a moment he said, "Cecilia, I know I have no right to ask anything of you. I want to say that before anything else. I know what I did. I've known for a long time." She said, knowing and coming to the door are different things. "Yes." She looked at him. "What made you come yourself? You could have sent the lawyer." He considered the question. She could see him considering it honestly, which was, she thought, probably a more recent development than she would have credited him with in earlier years. The honesty of a man who has been alone for 5 years with the full inventory of his decisions and has arrived at something true by necessity. "Because it didn't seem right to send someone else," he said. "This is between us. It always was." A pause. "Even when I pretended it wasn't." Cecilia looked at him for a long moment across the kitchen table, across the open manila folder and the half-cold tea and 37 years of a Tuesday that had never entirely ended. She stood. She picked up both cups and brought them to the sink. She stood at the window for a moment, looking out at the back garden bare March, the beds empty, the soil dark, and waiting nothing growing yet, but the whole apparatus of it present under the surface ready. She turned back. "I'm going to call Catherine," she said. "I'd like her to be here for the rest of this conversation. Not for her sake, for mine." Leonard said, "All right." She picked up her phone. Then she looked at him once more. "And Leonard, I haven't decided yet. I want you to know that. I know what I believe I'll decide. But I haven't decided yet." He nodded. He understood the distinction. It was, she thought, one of the first things he had understood correctly since he knocked. She called Catherine at 4:15. Catherine arrived at 4:47. The drive was 12 minutes. She had done it in 8. She stood in the kitchen doorway, 54 years old, her mother's coloring, her mother's particular quality of stillness, and looked at Leonard Marsh for the first time in 37 years. He was older than she had imagined, smaller. He was sitting at her mother's kitchen table holding a paper cup with both hands, and he looked, she would tell her husband later, like a man who had finally arrived somewhere after a very long drive to a destination he was not sure would let him in. She looked at her mother. Cecilia nodded once the nod that had meant for 54 years across 100 different situations, "I have this. Stay." Catherine stayed. "Before we go further, I want to ask you something. Has someone ever dismissed you or someone you loved and later realized how wrong they were? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one." Catherine pulled the third chair from against the wall. Not Leonard's chair, not Cecilia's chair, but the one that had no assigned position, and placed it at the end of the table, where she was equidistant from both of them. She sat down. She had not spoken since she came through the door. She looked at Leonard with the expression of a woman who has known exactly what happened on a specific night in November for 48 years and has never been in the same room as the man responsible for it. Leonard looked at her. He opened his mouth. She said, "You don't have to explain anything to me." A pause. "I'm not here for an explanation. Mom asked me to come. I came." He closed his mouth. Catherine reached across the table and picked up the quitclaim deed from the open folder. She read it, the whole document from the top, methodically, the way her mother read documents, the way Cecilia had taught her, without teaching her, simply by being observed. She set it down. The lawyer prepared this correctly, and she said, the observation of someone noting a technical fact. She looked at Leonard. "Have you called Wren?" she said to her mother. Cecilia said, "Not yet." "Do you want to—" "I know what it says. Wren explained it 3 years ago." Catherine nodded once. She turned back to Leonard. "My mother has known about this property and this document for 3 years. Leonard said, "She told me." Catherine, "She didn't call you. She didn't contact you. She didn't threaten a claim or instruct a lawyer to send letters." She looked at him steadily, without heat. She waited. A pause. "Do you understand why—" Leonard looked at Cecilia. Something was working in his face, the careful, labored movement of a man who has been given a question he is not used to being asked and is trying to answer it honestly rather than strategically. "Because she was deciding," he said. "Because she was deciding," Catherine said. She leaned back in the third chair. "I want to ask you one question. You don't have to answer it, but I'm going to ask it." Leonard said, "All right. The night you left the storm night, November 1987, did you think about us, me and Daniel? Did you think when you got in the car about what would happen to us when the power went out?" The kitchen was entirely still. Leonard looked at his hands. He was quiet for long enough that it was not a pause. It was an honest accounting, the kind that requires time, because the honest answer is not the one you have been living with. "No," he said. Another silence. "I thought about the road. I thought about getting there before the storm got worse." He stopped. "I didn't think about what I was leaving behind." He said it flatly, without the mitigation of explanation, the simple, undefended fact of it. Catherine said, "Mom made a fire. She found 2 candles in the back of the pantry. She sat in the armchair the whole night. I know, she told me." "She didn't sleep." "I know. She's been buying a box of emergency candles every month since November of 1987. Catherine looked at the shelf above the counter, the box in its place, the same as it had always been in the same place, replaced on the first Tuesday of every month for 37 years. She replaces them whether or not she uses any. She has done this every month since that night. Leonard followed her look to the shelf. He looked at the box. He looked at it for a long moment with the expression of a man receiving information that reorganizes something, not dramatically, not with visible emotion, but with the particular interior shift of a person, understanding the full shape of a thing they caused. "I didn't know that," he said. "I know it now." He said it quietly. It was not an apology, and it was not an excuse. It was just the acknowledgement of a man arriving 37 years late at the accurate dimensions of what he had done. Cecilia had let Catherine run this for a reason, not to use her daughter as a weapon, not to make Leonard answer to someone else's anger on her behalf. Catherine had been in that house. Catherine had been 6 years old and had asked where Daddy was the next morning. Catherine had her own account with this man, and it was hers to present or withhold as she chose, and she had chosen to present it, and Cecilia had watched her do it with the particular pride of a mother who has raised someone to know what they are owed, and how to ask for it with full composure. When Catherine finished, Cecilia said, "Thank you." Not to Leonard, to Catherine. Catherine looked at her mother. "Are you ready?" Cecilia said yes. She picked up the quitclaim deed. She read it one more time, not because she needed to, not because there was anything in it she had not already examined from every angle over 3 years of knowing, because a decision made over 3 years deserves to be met by the document it concerns looked at directly before it becomes an action. She read it. She set it down. She picked up the pen. Leonard watched. Catherine watched. The kitchen was completely quiet. She signed. 3 seconds. Her name in the handwriting she had written on 31 years of insurance documents and office correspondence and birthday cards and mortgage payments, the handwriting of a woman who had built an entire life in the space that a man left by driving away in a storm. She set the pen down. She slid the document across the table to Leonard. "There," she said. "It's done." He reached for it. His hands were not steady. He looked at her over the top of the document, the look of a man who has received what he came for and discovered it is accompanied by something he did not come for and cannot put down. "What he said." Cecilia looked at him. "Because keeping it wouldn't give me anything I don't already have." A pause. The kitchen held it. "And because your son didn't leave me in a storm." The silence that followed was complete. Leonard did not speak. He looked at the signed document in his hands. He looked at the candle box on the shelf. He looked at Cecilia, at her face, which was entirely still and entirely clear. The face of a woman who has finished something. He was going to say something. She could see him preparing the words. The insufficient words, the ones people say anyway, because saying nothing feels worse than saying the wrong thing. She said, "Don't thank me, Leonard. This isn't a gift." He said, "What is it?" She said, "It's a signature." A pause. "It's what I decided to do with what I had. That's all." She had signed in 3 seconds after a 3-year decision. Leonard had what he came for. He had also received something he hadn't come for, an accounting of a night in 1987, delivered by a woman who had been 6 years old and remembered everything, and a box of candles on a shelf that had been replaced every month for 37 years. He would drive 4 hours back to Columbus with the signed deed and a particular kind of knowledge that has no legal status and no financial value and is the heaviest thing a person can carry home. Before we go further, I want to ask you something. Has someone ever dismissed you or someone you loved and later realized how wrong they were? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one. Catherine pulled the 3rd chair from against the wall. Not Leonard's chair, not Cecilia's chair, but the one that had no assigned position, and placed it at the end of the table where she was equidistant from both of them. She sat down. She had not spoken since she came through the door. She looked at Leonard with the expression of a woman who has known exactly what happened on a specific night in November for 48 years, and has never been in the same room as the man responsible for it. Leonard looked at her. He opened his mouth. She said, "You don't have to explain anything to me." A pause. "I'm not here for an explanation. Mom asked me to come. I came." He closed his mouth. Catherine reached across the table and picked up the quitclaim deed from the open folder. She read it, the whole document from the top, methodically, the way her mother read documents, the way Cecilia had taught her without teaching her, simply by being observed. She set it down. "The lawyer prepared this correctly," she said. "The observation of someone noting a technical fact." She looked at Leonard. "Have you called Wren?" she said to her mother. Cecilia said, "Not yet." "Do you want to—" "I know what it says. Wren explained it 3 years ago." Catherine nodded once. She turned back to Leonard. "My mother has known about this property and this document for 3 years." Leonard said, "She told me." Catherine, she didn't call you. She didn't contact you. She didn't threaten a claim or instruct a lawyer to send letters. She looked at him steadily, without heat. She waited. A pause. Do you understand why? Leonard looked at Cecilia. Something was working in his face, the careful, labored movement of a man who has been given a question he is not used to being asked and is trying to answer it honestly rather than strategically. Because she was deciding, he said. Because she was deciding, Catherine said. She leaned back in the third chair. I want to ask you one question. You don't have to answer it, but I'm going to ask it. Leonard said, All right. The night you left the storm, night November 1987, did you think about us, me and Daniel? Did you think when you got in the car about what would happen to us when the power went out? The kitchen was entirely still. Leonard looked at his hands. He was quiet for long enough that it was not a pause. It was an honest accounting, the kind that requires time, because the honest answer is not the one you have been living with. No, he said. Another silence. I thought about the road. I thought about getting there before the storm got worse. He stopped. I didn't think about what I was leaving behind. He said it flatly, without the mitigation of explanation, the simple, undefended fact of it. Catherine said, Mom made a fire. She found 2 candles in the back of the pantry. She sat in the armchair the whole night. I know, she told me. She didn't sleep. I know. She's been buying a box of emergency candles every month since November of 1987. Catherine looked at the shelf above the counter, the box in its place, the same as it had always been in the same place, replaced on the first Tuesday of every month for 37 years. She replaces them whether or not she uses any. She has done this every month since that night. Leonard followed her look to the shelf. He looked at the box. He looked at it for a long moment with the expression of a man receiving information that reorganizes something, not dramatically, not with visible emotion, but with the particular interior shift of a person, understanding the full shape of a thing they caused. I didn't know that, he said. I know it now. He said it quietly. It was not an apology, and it was not an excuse. It was just the acknowledgement of a man arriving 37 years late at the accurate dimensions of what he had done. Cecilia had let Catherine run this for a reason, not to use her daughter as a weapon, not to make Leonard answer to someone else's anger on her behalf. Catherine had been in that house. Catherine had been 6 years old and had asked where Daddy was the next morning. Catherine had her own account with this man, and it was hers to present or withhold as she chose, and she had chosen to present it, and Cecilia had watched her do it, with the particular pride of a mother who has raised someone to know what they are owed and how to ask for it with full composure. When Catherine finished, Cecilia said, Thank you. Not to Leonard, to Catherine. Catherine looked at her mother. Are you ready? Cecilia said yes. She picked up the quitclaim deed. She read it one more time, not because she needed to, not because there was anything in it she had not already examined from every angle over 3 years of knowing, because a decision made over 3 years deserves to be met by the document it concerns looked at directly before it becomes an action. She read it. She set it down. She picked up the pen. Leonard watched. Catherine watched. The kitchen was completely quiet. She signed. 3 seconds. Her name in the handwriting she had written on 31 years of insurance documents and office correspondence and birthday cards and mortgage payments, the handwriting of a woman who had built an entire life in the space that a man left by driving away in a storm. She set the pen down. She slid the document across the table to Leonard. There, she said. It's done! He reached for it. His hands were not steady. He looked at her over the top of the document, the look of a man who has received what he came for and discovered it is accompanied by something he did not come for and cannot put down. Why? He said. Cecilia looked at him. Because keeping it wouldn't give me anything I don't already have. A pause. The kitchen held it. And because your son didn't leave me in a storm. The silence that followed was complete. Leonard did not speak. He looked at the signed document in his hands. He looked at the candle box on the shelf. He looked at Cecilia, at her face, which was entirely still and entirely clear, the face of a woman who has finished something. He was going to say something. She could see him preparing the words. The insufficient words, the ones people say anyway, because saying nothing feels worse than saying the wrong thing. She said, "Don't thank me, Leonard. This isn't a gift." He said, "What is it?" She said, "It's a signature." A pause. "It's what I decided to do with what I had. That's all." She had signed in 3 seconds after a 3-year decision. Leonard had what he came for. He had also received something he hadn't come for, an accounting of a night in 1987, delivered by a woman who had been 6 years old and remembered everything, in a box of candles on a shelf that had been replaced every month for 37 years. He would drive 4 hours back to Columbus with the signed deed and a particular kind of knowledge that has no legal status and no financial value and is the heaviest thing a person can carry home. Before we go further, I want to ask you something. Has someone ever dismissed you or someone you loved and later realized how wrong they were? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one. Leonard left at 5:30. At the door he said thank you, and this time Cecilia let him say it because it was true, and it cost him something, and she had no interest in taking that from him. She closed the door. She and Catherine stood in the hallway for a moment in the particular quiet of a house that has just had something large happen in it and is settling back into itself. Then Cecilia said, "Are you staying for dinner?" Catherine said, "Yes." They moved to the kitchen the way they had moved to this kitchen together for 54 years, without negotiation, without assigning tasks, with the easy division of 2 people who have cooked together often enough that the choreography is entirely automatic. Catherine went to the refrigerator, Cecilia went to the stove. Catherine found what there was and began to chop. Cecilia put water on and found the things she needed. Nobody said anything about Leonard for the first 20 minutes. The kitchen filled with the ordinary sounds of dinner being made, the knife on the board, the burner clicking to life, the specific domestic music of a Tuesday evening that was also and would always be the evening after something finished. Catherine said, "Are you all right?" Cecilia stirred. "Yes." A pause. "I thought I might feel, I don't know, more." Catherine set down the knife. "What do you feel?" Cecilia considered the question with the seriousness it deserved, the honest effort of a woman who has spent her life trying to be accurate about what is true, including about herself. "Tired," she said, "and finished, like when you close a book. A good book or a bad one." Cecilia looked at the pot. "One you've been carrying a long time." Catherine was quiet for a moment. Then, "I've been angry at him my whole life." She said it simply, not as an accusation, not as a performance of feeling, a statement of the ongoing fact. "Seeing him today, he's just an old man." "I know." He looked scared. "He was." "Of you?" Cecilia said. "Of what I might do, of whether I would." A pause. "And of what I did instead. I think that was the part he was least prepared for." Catherine picked up the knife again. She chopped for a moment. "Why did you sign Mom really not what you said to him?" Cecilia set her spoon on the rest beside the pot. She looked at her daughter, at the woman her daughter had become, who had been 6 years old in a dark house with candles and a fire that her mother kept going through the night, who had been angry about that night for 48 years on behalf of a woman who had, at some point, she could not precisely locate, finished being angry herself. "Because not signing would have meant I still needed something from him," she said. "Something he owes me." A pause. "I don't need anything from Leonard Marsh. I haven't needed anything from him since November of 1987. Catherine looked at her. She did not say anything for a moment. Then she went back to her chopping, and Cecilia went back to her stirring, and they made dinner together in the kitchen, where Cecilia had made dinner alone for 37 years, and Catherine had come to eat it on Tuesdays and Sundays, and any evening something needed talking through, and the room held all of that without comment. After a while, Catherine said, "What about Daniel?" "I'll call him tomorrow. He should know Leonard came." "He'll be—" "I know what he'll be." Cecilia picked up her spoon. "He can feel what he feels. He doesn't have to sign anything. He doesn't have to do anything at all." She looked at the pot. I only had to decide for me. They ate at the kitchen table, the same table where Leonard had sat 2 hours earlier with his manila folder and his half-cold tea and his 37 years of arriving late to the only conversation that mattered. Cecilia and Catherine ate and talked about Catherine's grandchildren and about a book Cecilia was reading for the library group and about the garden that would need attention in April. They talked about ordinary things, which were the things worth talking about, which had always been the things worth talking about. After dinner, they washed up together the same positions they had occupied at this sink for decades, Catherine washing Cecilia, drying the rhythm of it entirely without thought. Catherine handed her a dish. The candles, Mom, the box on the shelf. Cecilia dried the dish, yes. I've been thinking about that since I was 14, and you said what you said. But what did I say? Catherine handed her another dish. I asked you why you always bought them. You said, because I know how to get through a power outage now. She passed the last glass across. I've been thinking about that for 40 years. What it meant. Cecilia took the glass. She dried it. She looked at the shelf, the box of candles in its place, the dishes in theirs, the accumulated order of a kitchen that had been tended by one person through 37 years of ordinary Tuesdays and extraordinary ones. Since that night, she said, yes, I've known since that night. Catherine left at 8. Cecilia walked her to the door and watched her car go down the street, the taillights disappearing at the corner, going in the direction they always went toward the house. Catherine would return toward the life she had built in a city 15 minutes away from her mother's kitchen. Cecilia went back inside. She washed the 2 teacups from the afternoon, hers and Leonard's, in the same water with the same cloth, and put them away together on the shelf where cups went. She did not think about the gesture. She washed cups. She put them away. She turned off the kitchen light. The room went dark. Through the window, the streetlight came in and touched the shelf, the candle box, the dishes, the small and complete inventory of a life built entirely by one woman over 37 years, everything in its place, everything known. She stood in the dark for a moment. She did not turn the light back on. She knew where everything was. She had known for a long time. We're almost at the end of this story. If it's moved you, if it feels like something you've lived through, subscribe. Stories like Cecilia's deserve to be heard. She called Daniel at 9 on Wednesday morning, his day off, the day she had always called him since he moved to Cincinnati 12 years ago. He picked up on the second ring. She said, I need to tell you something. Your father came to the house yesterday. A silence. Then Daniel said, my father. Not a question. A repetition, the kind you make when a word that has been theoretical for a very long time suddenly becomes a concrete noun again, when the abstraction you have been carrying resolves without warning into something that happened on a specific Tuesday afternoon in your mother's kitchen. She told him the full account, the property in Columbus, the title defect, the 3 years of knowing, the consulting firm's letter in 2021, Ren Nakamura's office, the quarterly updates, the decision made before the knock, Leonard at the kitchen table with his manila folder and his unsteady hands, Catherine arriving in 8 minutes, the signing. She told it in order, without omission, in the way she had always told her children things, completely at their eye level, without softening the parts that were hard. Daniel listened without interrupting. She could hear him breathing. She could hear him not saying things. When she finished, there was a long silence. Then, you signed it. Yes. Mom, I know what you're going to say. You're going to say he didn't deserve it, that he should have had to fight for it, go to court, or do something harder than one Tuesday afternoon at my kitchen table. A pause. Am I wrong? A breath. No, he exhaled. You're not wrong. She waited. Daniel said, I was 4 years old. I don't remember that night. I only know what you and Catherine told me over the years. A pause. But Catherine remembers. She was okay with this. Catherine was there. She asked him her question and she got her answer. What was the question? Cecilia told him word for word in Catherine's voice as she had heard it the afternoon before, sitting at the end of the table in the third chair, The night you left, did you think about us, me and Daniel? And Leonard's answer, single syllable, undefended no. The silence on Daniel's end was different from the ones before. Not angry, not processing in the immediate way. Something quieter, the particular stillness of a person receiving a confirmation of something they have always known was true and are now hearing stated plainly for the first time by someone who was present. He said, "I've been angry at him since I was old enough to understand what happened." "I know." "I've never talked to him, never wanted to." "You don't have to." A pause. "My signing doesn't change anything you feel, Daniel. It doesn't forgive anything on your behalf. I only had the authority to decide for me, and I signed because it was the right decision for me at this point in my life, not because he deserved it." A longer silence. Then carefully, "Does Catherine feel the same way?" "She has her own version of it. It's hers." He was quiet for a moment. Then, Did he ask about me?" The question arrived carefully with the particular care of a 41-year-old man reaching back to the 4-year-old he had been and asking on that boy's behalf the question that boy had never been able to ask. Cecilia said, "He asked how Catherine was. He didn't ask about you." She did not soften it. She did not follow it with an explanation or a theory about why. She simply told him. Daniel said, "Okay." One syllable. Everything and nothing inside it, 41 years of a question whose answer, now that it had arrived, was exactly what he had always suspected, and was somehow both worse and more manageable than the uncertainty had been. "Okay." After a moment, he said, "Mom, are you really all right? Not the thing you say when I ask? Actually." Cecilia sat with the question the way he had asked her to sit with it, not reaching for the habitual reassurance, not filing it efficiently. "Actually. I'm finished with it, Daniel. That's the honest answer. I've been finished with it for a long time, and yesterday was the last paperwork." She looked at the kitchen, the shelf, the candles, the cups she had washed the night before and put away. The difficult part was 37 years ago. Yesterday was just a Tuesday. A silence. Then something on Daniel's end that began as a breath and resolved into a brief, exhausted laugh. The laugh that is only available to people who have just passed through something hard and come out on the other side where ordinary things are funny again. The laugh of a son who has spent his whole life watching his mother reduce impossible things to their accurate size. "Just a Tuesday," he said. Just a Tuesday. Before they hung up, Daniel said, "I'm coming to visit next month. I was going to anyway, but you don't have to come because of this." "I know. I'm coming because I want to see you." "Good." A pause. "Bring the children. Catherine's grandchildren are getting taller than her, and she's very put out about it." Daniel laughed a real laugh this time, unprepared, the laugh that belongs to ordinary life, reasserting its ordinary claims after a conversation that had been anything but. "I'll tell them that," he said. "Don't," Cecilia said. "Just bring them." She hung up at 9:42. She had been on the phone for 42 minutes. She had told her son the full truth, given him his own version of the answer to his own version of the question, and left him with something he could carry at his own pace. She had not told him how to feel. She had not made his grief smaller or his anger wrong. She had simply told him what happened and let him be Daniel about it, which was all she had ever been able to give him and all he had ever needed. The following Tuesday, Cecilia made tea at 3 p.m, the same tea, the same cup, the chair by the window she had occupied every Tuesday since 1991. The light through the kitchen window was different now. Early April, not yet warm, but no longer the flat gray of March. Something in the angle had shifted the way it shifts every year at exactly this point, the sun finding a slightly different path through the window and landing differently on the floor. She noticed it the way she noticed all small changes without drama, with full attention. The quitclaim deed was with Wren's office filed and completed, Cecilia's name removed from a property in Columbus she had never visited and never needed. One signature, 3 years of deciding. Now it was simply done the way things are done when they are finished. She went to the store at 3:30, a Tuesday habit from her working years, when Tuesday afternoon was the only window she could reliably get there before the shelves were depleted. She no longer needed to time her errands around a schedule. She went on Tuesdays because she went on Tuesdays. She moved through the store with the efficiency of a woman who has been shopping for herself for a long time and knows exactly what she needs. Vegetables for the week, the tea she preferred, bread. At the end of the household aisle, the candles, the same brand, the same size, the same box that had been going on to the shelf in her kitchen every month for 37 years. She picked one up. She placed it in the cart. She thought briefly about whether the blue guest room towels needed washing before Daniel arrived next month. She did not think about November of 1987. She did not think about Leonard. At the checkout, the young cashier scanned the candle box and glanced at it with the mild curiosity of someone who notices things without attaching significance to them. "Do you burn a lot of candles?" "I replace them every month," Cecilia said. "For ambiance." Cecilia looked at the box for a moment, at the familiar packaging, the same design it had carried for years, the object she had purchased without thinking, and would purchase without thinking on the first Tuesday of every month for as long as she lived in that house. "I keep them in case the power goes out," she said. The cashier bagged them. "Smart." Cecilia took the bag. "Yes," she said. "Eventually." At home, the new box went onto the shelf in its place. Old box moved to the back, new box to the front. The same rotation that had been happening since the winter of 1987. 37 years of this exact gesture. She had never used a single candle from the emergency supply. She had never needed to. That was not she had come to understand in the years since she first understood at the point. The point was that they were there. The point was that she put them there. The point was that the decision to put them there was hers. Catherine called at 4 from her car, the grandchildren audible in the background, making the pleasant noise of children whose school day has just ended, and the afternoon's possibilities are fully open. "How are you?" Catherine said. "Good. I went to the store." "Candles, Candles." A small pause, not heavy, not weighted with everything it contained because it no longer needed to be. Just the pause of two women who share now a complete understanding of a word that used to require explanation. "Daniel called me," Catherine said. "I know. He told me he would." "He's okay." "Yes. He said you called it just a Tuesday." "It was." From the back seat, one of the grandchildren said something with great urgency about something that had happened at recess. Catherine said, "I have to go. Tuesday dinner." Cecilia said, "Go. Give them my love." Catherine said, "Always." In the evening, Cecilia sat in the chair by the window with the last of the day's light. The garden was returning. She could see it in the way the ground looked now. Different from the way it had looked in February, different even from the way it had looked last week. The particular aliveness of April soil when the cold has finally released its claim, and the things that have been waiting underground have begun to move. She had watched this garden return for 51 springs. She had watched it return alone for 37 of them. She had never, not once, thought of the house as incomplete. It was the house she had stayed in when the storm came and everything else left. That was what made it hers, not the deed, not the address, not the number of years. The staying. She went to bed at 9:30. The lights went off room by room as she moved through the house, the living room, the hallway, the kitchen last passing the shelf in the dark, without turning on the light, because she knew where everything was and had known for a long time. She did not need to see the shelf to know the candles were there. In the bedroom, she opened the window a few inches. The April air came in cold, still but different from the cold of winter, carrying in it the particular smell of ground that is waking up of things resuming. She pulled the blanket up. She closed her eyes. She was asleep in 4 minutes, the sleep of a woman with no unfinished business, no unasked questions, no unanswered knocks. Just the house, the April air, 37 years of knowing she could handle what the night brought. She replaced the candles every month for 37 years, not because she expected another storm, because she had decided on a November night in 1987 that she would always be the person who made sure the candles were there. Leonard had come and gone. The deed was filed. The garden was coming back. and on a Tuesday in April in the house she had never left, Cecilia Marsh made tea and went to the store and replaced the candles and talked to her daughter and watched the light change in the garden and went to sleep without the light on because she had never needed anyone else to leave it on for her. She had learned that the hard way, and she had learned it so completely and so long ago that it was no longer hard at all. It was just who she was. If Cecilia's story stayed with you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you haven't subscribed yet, now is the right time. More stories like this one are coming. Don't miss them.